All right, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College, and I've been going over the PowerPoint presentations from Murachs, HTML5, and CSS3 3rd edition for the AWD Application and Web Development 1000 Web Technologies class. We're up to Chapter 17 of 19, and in this chapter, we'll learn kind of another approach to providing web pages for mobile devices. Back in Chapter 8, we talked about media queries and we talked about responsive web design. And in this chapter, we'll talk about the Jquery library called Jquery Mobile. And I'm probably not going to go into this with as much depth and breadth of coverage as I'd like. I'm not real familiar. I haven't done very much with the product. Again, my hope is eventually we will create a web page kind of as a class, and when we do that, I'd like to see if we can get a mobile version or mobile version of it also. So we have one applied, and I think it's 9 knowledge objectives. Our applied objective: use the Jquery Mobile, and it's usually pronounced mobile, features that are presented in this chapter to build a website for mobile devices. That's the applied, and the knowledge are: give 2 reasons for creating a separate website for mobile devices rather than converting an existing site to use responsive web design. Explain how a JavaScript plugin can be used by a full website to redirect an HTTP request from a mobile device to a mobile website. Describe the use of the Viewport meta element for mobile devices. Explain how testing a mobile website differs from testing a website for computer screens. Describe Jquery Mobile and the 3 files that it requires. Describe 2 ways to include the Jquery Mobile files in your web pages. In general terms, describe how you use Jquery Mobile to build mobile websites. Describe how these attributes are used by Jquery Mobile: data role, data transition, data dialog, data rel, data icon, data theme, and class. Finally, describe 2 ways that you can apply the swatches in a theme to the components of a web page if you're using Jquery Mobile. So, they have here, this would be a website that you would see on a regular computer. Here it would be a mobile version, so I mean this could be, depending on its size, it could be on a phone, it could be on a tablet, we don't know. Okay? So there's 2 basic ways that you can provide web pages for a mobile device. Number 1 is what we talked about back in Chapter 8, and that was the use of responsive web design, so that the pages of the website will work on all devices of any size, including mobile devices. And that involved a lot of working with media queries and doing a lot of work. But you could have one site that would handle everything. The second thing that you can do is to develop a separate mobile version of the website that a user would be redirected to. And often, I just wanted to show you, for instance, I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I still get an electronic version of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. And if I go and look at the Journal-Sentinel and I bring it up on my computer, I go out to JS for Journal-Sentinel online.com. But if I bring it up on my phone, and I go to www.jsonline.com, I believe at least I end up going out to a mobile version of the site, so like mjsonline.com, and many sites are set up like that. As far as how to redirect a user to the mobile site version of a site, you can use jQuery or JavaScript to detect mobile devices and then redirect them. Or you can use the server-side scripting language like PHP rather, ASP.NET, JSP, or whatever. There are benefits of having a separate website. One is, as it says, it's usually easier and less expensive to develop a separate website than it is to re-engineer an established or existing website with responsive web design. Secondly, the mobile website can be simplified in a way that is appropriate for mobile devices. You can have less content and, as it says, fewer pages. So today, responsive web design is probably the preferred way to provide web pages and mobile devices. But if you have a large established site, converting it using responsive web design is likely to be very time consuming and expensive. May even be impractical. Because there's so many ways there are so many different types of mobile devices and mobile browsers, it's difficult to code and maintain a JavaScript app that redirects to a mobile version of a website. So if you need to do that, a good way to do it is to look for a plugin that would do whatever it is you want. Now, one website that provides scripts for detecting browsers is the Detect Browsers website that's shown on the screen here. It provides scripts for clients and servers to detect browsers and redirect them appropriately. And as far as how to use this JavaScript plugin for mobile detection, it says here, and I think it'll be on the next page, there. Go to the URL, then click on the JavaScript button under the download scripts. So that'd be right here. To download a file named detectmobilebrowser.js.txt. Then you open that file in your text editor, move the cursor to the end of the JavaScript code, which will include a URL, all right, that will look kind of like this one here. Then change the URL to the path of the mobile site you want the user redirected to. Save your work, rename the file so that the .txt extension is removed, and deploy it on your web server. Then, in any page that you wanted to redirect, code a script element that refers to that file that you've just deployed. So, the Detect Mobile Browsers website offers many client-side and server-side scripts for redirecting a mobile device from a full version. Again, after you modify the URL so that it points to where you want it to point to, you need to provide a script element on any and every page that you want to have redirected. So here's a web page on an iPhone before scaling. Okay? Now, what they're going to talk about in here is working with Viewport. Why? Well, when you develop a website for mobile devices, you can use the special meta element to configure that device's viewport. We talked about this back in Chapter 8, but you should also know that if a full website will be displayed on a mobile device, or if you're developing a mobile device with Jquery Mobile, you're going to need to be able to use this. You don't want your website to look like this. You want it to look more, at least, like this. The viewport on a mobile device can be larger or smaller than the visible area of a web page. All right. In this example, the web page is displayed without a meta element. So almost the entire width of the page is visible. And that's because the default width of the viewport for an iPhone is 980 pixels. If you contrast that with this picture here, you'll see that it has a viewport meta element that sets the viewport and the scale to 0.5 or 50%, which makes the pages easier to work with on a mobile device. Now, if you want to start using this, all right, you have to use the meta element with a name set to viewport. Then, for the content, you specify the properties that are summarized in the figure right here, and also shown on the bottom of page 563 in the book. So you've got width, which is the width of the viewport in pixels, height, which is the height of the viewport in pixels, initial scale, which is a number that indicates the initial zoom factor that's used to display the page, minimum scale and maximum scale, which are both represent numbers that indicate either the minimum zoom factor for the page or the maximum zoom factor for the page, and user scalable, which indicates whether the user can zoom in and out of the viewport. Yes and no are the possible values. So the viewport on a mobile device is what determines the content that's displayed on the page. There's a couple of examples here. So there are some guidelines shown on the page here for designing mobile web pages. Let's go over them. Keep it simple, the KISS principle. You're typically going to have a one-column layout. Include only essential content. That's a hard one because a lot of people tend to think that all the content on a web page is essential. Keep images small and to a minimum. Don't put in images if you don't need them. Again, was that image needed there? I don't know. These probably are. Avoid using Flash. Again, iPhones don't support it. Include only the essential navigation in the header of a page. Make links and other elements large enough so that the user can easily manipulate them. Use relative measurements. Remember, percents and ems, not absolute measurements. So do not use pixels, do not use points. Few guidelines for testing mobile pages. Test all pages on as many mobile devices as possible and as many different browsers as possible. The best way to test the pages is to deploy them on your web server and test them on the devices themselves. When you can't do that, you should use emulators and browser simulators, some of which have been discussed already. So, starting on 566, we learn how to get started with Jquery Mobile. It says in chapters 15 and 16, you'll learn to use Jquery and the Jquery UI. Now in this chapter, you'll learn to use the Jquery Mobile Library to develop mobile versions. Although there are other ways to develop mobile versions, the authors think Jquery Mobile sets a standard that other web development methods are going to have a hard time beating. So you need two libraries in order to do this. You need the Jquery Library and the Jquery Mobile Library. Jquery Mobile, like Jquery, is free open source. All right, it's a JavaScript library that you can use, and it's set up distinctly, exclusively for setting up mobile websites. The library lets you create pages with the look and feel like the pages of a native mobile application. To include it, again, you have to download the files we just mentioned, or you can use a CDN. It says here the three files that you will need to include for Jquery mobile applications. All right, the Jquery JavaScript file, which we've already talked about, the Jquery Mobile JavaScript file, and the Jquery Mobile CSS file. Again, this can be done with a direct download, or this can be done via a CDN. Now, Jquery Mobile is constantly evolving. So you may want to use a CDN so you've always got the latest and greatest versions. Next, they show you how to basically create a one-page website that uses Jquery Mobile. Now, it's very simple. It's got a header, some page content, and a footer. It looks pretty ugly. But the idea is, in the HTML, you use what are called the data role attributes to identify the page header and the page footer components. In contrast to that, you use the role attribute with a value of main to identify the component that will be the main part of the page. So if we look here, you'll notice role is page, role is header, role equal main, role is footer. So typically the HTML for a web page that uses jQuery Mobile will contain div, header, section, and footer elements. That data role that we looked at and that you see on the screen here is used to identify the three parts of the page. The page itself, all right, which is the main, the header, and the footer. They give a lot of other things. They mention that the text and the header should have an H1 element, etc. And those are things that probably typically do ring true. All right. But if you want to, another thing you can do is to code multiple pages in a single HTML file. And that's one of the things that jQuery Mobile allows you to do. Here in this example, you can see 2 pages of a site with the HTML for the pages. Both of these are coded in a single HTML file. For each page, you code one div element with page as the value of the data role attribute. Then within each of the div elements, you code the elements for the header, content, and footer. To link between the pages, you use placeholders. All right, and I think they're shown here. All right, where you can see this two-bin thing right here. Now, although this example only shows 2 pages, you can code as many pages as you want within a single HTML file. But remember, when you do that, all of the pages and their images and the JavaScript and the CSS are loaded with a single HTML file, so the load time may increase. As far as navigating between pages, there are different ways that you can do this. All right, you can use dialogues, you can use transitions, buttons, navigation bars, etc. So if you want to display a page as a dialogue, you can include the data dialog attribute with the value of true. Then if you do that, you're going to get the X like is shown right here. To specify the way a page of a dialog is opened, you can use the data transition attribute. The styling for this is going to be done by the jQuery Mobile CSS file. So the transitions that you can use for this include slide, where the next page slides in from right to left, slide up, where it slides in from bottom to top, slide down, where it slides from top to bottom, pop, where the next page fades in from the middle of the screen, fade, where the next page fades into view, that's the default, and flip, where the next page flips from back to front, similar to the way a playing card would be flipped. You can also, if you want to, use different buttons in here. If you want to add a button to a web page, you code an anchor element with its data role attribute set to button. In fact, I thought there was an example shown here. That's the ending example, but if you look in the book on page 577, they show the associated code for this. All right. These are the different icons that are provided by jQuery Mobile, and some of them are shown here and here. Oh, there's the HTML. All right. This figure shows how you can add a navigation bar to the header of a web page. All right, I don't want to run through all this because you're never going to remember it anyway. All right, by default, all the items in the navigation bar will be light gray background with dark gray type. If you want to make one of the classes active, you can assign the UI button active class to it, as is done right here. Okay, and they go through the steps there. So as we've already seen, jQuery Mobile automatically formats the components of the web page based on its own style sheet. All right. This figure shows the default styles that jQuery Mobile uses for common HTML elements. typically you won't need to modify it. It'll probably look pretty much the way you want it to look on a page. By default, jQuery Mobile automatically applies styles to the HTML elements for a page. These are not only attractive, but mimic the browser's native styles. By default, jQuery Mobile applies a small amount of padding to the left, right, top, and bottom of each page. By default, links are slightly larger than normal text to make them easier to tap. By default, links are underlined with blue as the font color. Okay. And if that's not enough for you, you can also come in and apply themes. So, how to apply themes to HTML elements. jQuery Mobile includes a default theme that consists of global settings, including the font and the corner radius of buttons and boxes, and also what are known as swatches. The two swatches that come with a default theme define different color combinations for various elements. In general, swatch A, which is the default, provides a light gray background with dark gray font, and swatch B provides a dark gray background and a white font. If you specify a swatch for an element, that swatch is inherited by any child elements. That's pretty heavy stuff, but you end up using what's called the theme roller in order to be able to do whatever it is that you want to do. All right, I'm probably I'm at 21 minutes, so I think I'm just going to go through here and finish this chapter, all right, in one lecture. So starting on page 584, they talk about how to use jQuery Mobile for page layout. So this example shows how you can display content in what's called collapsible content blocks. Then the user can tap on an item to expand or contract it. In many ways, this looks like an accordion when you think about it. More than one block can be expanded at the same time, and jQuery Mobile automatically adds the plus and the minus icons to the different blocks. Minus meaning it's currently open and click to close. Plus meaning it's currently closed and click to open. All right. You can create actual accordions as well. So in contrast to a collapsible content block, only one block in an accordion may be expanded at the same time. jQuery Mobile, again, will put the plus and minus signs in there for you. Now, again, it's always dependent on your user or who you're creating the site for, or you, or whatever, or probably a variety of circumstances as far as do you want to allow more than one thing that will be open at one time or just one thing to be open at a time. As with anything else in life, it just depends. What's shown next here is how to create a list. Here's a list with the defaults, and here is a list with two columns. Looks pretty similar to one another, but this figure shows how to create a list that can be used to link to other pages. In this first example, you can tap anywhere in the content block to go to a page that gives more information. But in the second example, you can tap on the image or the text to go to the speakers page, all right? Or the user can tap on the gear icon to go to the buy tickets page. The chapter pretty much ends with, starting on page 590, by going over, and there's a lot of code in here too, a mobile website that uses jQuery Mobile, or Mobile. All right, and it's pretty much the same one we've been looking at. Again, when the user taps on a speaker on the speakers page, a page for that speaker is opened. When the user taps on a gear, the buy tickets is open. When they tap on the phone number, the device's phone feature will try to call the number. When you tap on the email address, the device's email feature will try to start an email. So they show you on pages 593, 594, and 595 all the HTML for this. All right, that's pretty much it for this chapter. This concludes what we've been going over in section 3. All right, so in the next section, section 4, whoops, and I shouldn't have shut that, we will be going over 2 last chapters in the book. Chapter 18, which is on how to design a website, and Chapter 19, which is on how to deploy a website. So I'll be back with the lecture for Chapter 18 on how to design a website in just a couple minutes.